It's always been my understanding that they tried to turn the Alice Cooper group into the Monkees. Is that about right?
That's what it felt like to us. We had all these big ideas about, hey, someday we're going to be able to make our own film, and we're going to, let's get Salvador Dali and we'll make it really surrealistic, and we'll make it, you know, we wanted to make something that was the image of the Alice Cooper group. And then next thing we know, they brought in this guy who has us riding on elephants and everything else.
There's a German director who's losing his mind over the band. I mean, it's a really wild piece of footage.
Yeah.
But it was never really released theatrically, right?
It was released theatrically, but in those days, not just that particular cut of the film, but rock films in general, even the Stones, didn't have good box office numbers. So they released it, and then it kind of had a lukewarm thing, so they pulled it back in, and then they changed all of the Monkees shtick into old footage of Shirley Temple and various things they would put in. But basically, all they were trying to do is make the movie long enough so it could be feature length.
So I want to talk to you about this period, because obviously we are here to celebrate the 51st anniversary of Billion Dollar Babies. Available now in the lobby, by the way. It comes out tomorrow, but you can get it tonight. Wow! This is quite a hefty product, by the way.
It's significant.
So when they talk to you about putting out the 50th anniversary, obviously I assume it brings up a lot of memories, or at least you attempt to bring up a lot of memories, because certainly Alice talked about in many interviews during that period and after that period about what this album was, about how it was recorded, about what it was meant to say about the Alice Cooper group and the reaction to it in 1973. Because certainly after school's out, you guys are thinking, you take off in a way that I don't think anybody was prepared for, especially the label. And Billion Dollar Babies comes to symbolize the stardom of the group. And I'm very interested, as you think about that period 51 years ago, and what it meant, and what you guys were trying to do, and how you recorded this album, 3 different locations, including in a mansion, no less, in Connecticut. What this album means to you.
Well, you know, it's one of those 18 put food on the table, you know, and this one put champagne on the table.
I think it put more than that on the table, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, the main thing, all of our shows, which represented the albums, and some of those albums came out, we were doing 2 albums a year, kind of.
That was the norm, right? I mean, it was like 2 albums?
Well, the Beatles set that bar high. So, yeah, back in those days, the concept was you would have an album out, and then it would do as well as possible, and as soon as it started to look like it was going down the charts, you wanted to hit them with another one, you know. Nowadays, you put out an album and wait 2 to 4 years before you think about making another one, I guess. I don't know. But this represented us, all of these dreams that we had that we couldn't afford to do. You know, we had an electric chair, but we built it ourselves in the garage, you know. So finally, we can do these ideas that we had been thinking of all along. And it took all of the previous albums, including Pretties for You and Easy Action, to develop those concepts to the point where they were solid. And another factor is we have 5 personalities in the band. And, you know, it wasn't so easy to talk everybody into dressing androgynous in those days, you know, like, but that worked out because the girls liked it. So the other guys, Michael Bruce, got on board with it. But it was a team, you know, so these concepts, artistic ideas to get all of these guys on the same page that that's what we're going to do regardless, even though everybody was telling us you can't do that all along, and now to finally have everybody go, oh, I guess you can do that.
As I think about the recording of it, as I think about the messaging of it, as I think about the intention of it, it's a really interesting record. It's theatrical. It starts out with a song that 3 years earlier had been recorded by Judy Collins, of all people. And I've always wanted to ask you about that. I find it to be a fascinating record because it sort of became, in a lot of ways, the definitive Alice Cooper Group album. It was the album that outraged, I believe it was a Labour MP in England who came out against the album because it was about necrophilia. I'm fascinated by what the intention was behind it and how much you guys knew you could get away with at this particular moment.
Back in those days, it's hard to realize how we got the term shock rock, because some of the things besides the necrophilia, even that these days is pretty tame by what people are doing now. Back then, we had to be careful because the censors were breathing down our necks at every step of the way. And so we would figure out a way to go right up to that line and then just stick our toe across. Because if you went too far across, you would get censored and have to sell your album, like the Fugs, under the counter or whatever. So that was basically it. We wanted to be as outrageous and get as much attention as we could, but we had to do it in a way that we could get criticized, but not actually people being able to prevent us from being able to do it. And they did. I mean, certain towns in America banned the Alice Cooper Group because of rumors of, all of the evil that we were bringing to our kids in America. But, the true fans realize that there's a tongue-in-cheek, humorous thing to it all. And this album has that. It also has the scary parts. And we're like, why can't we do scary things on stage? Go to the movies.
Yeah.
Everything we did was worse at the drive-in theater, than it was what we were doing on stage. But for some reason, because it was rock and roll, everybody was out to get us. But you know what? We knew that. I mean, why was Elvis popular? Parents said, oh, you can't see him from the waist down. Well, what did we have to do? We got to see Elvis,
But people were bringing this, I think it's interesting because it was bringing this into the home. To go see a scary movie, you had to leave your house, you had to leave it in the theater. This you brought into your house. This you could listen to over and over again. This had a very visceral effect. I remember the first time I heard it, it scared the shit out of me. I was 5 years old. And after that, I just fell in love with it because it meant something different to me as I got older. And what it meant to me was, I think, what it meant to you guys, which was it was a commentary on your fame. The title Billion Dollar Babies is, in fact, meant to reflect the fact that 2 years prior, nobody paid attention to you, at least as far as the album, the label was concerned. Then suddenly you guys are big stars, you're on the radio all the time, and you realize we can probably get away with a lot more than we could in 1971. Is that right?
That's right, but being more popular also brought more criticism, because the bigger you get, the more people pick apart every little thing that you do. But you're right, there's so many different levels to it. It was us thumbing our nose. Hey, you said we can't do it. Yeah, here you go, $1 billion babies.
So talk about the fact that you guys were better songwriters. It was often said at the time, and I think it holds true in a lot of ways today, especially as you go back and listen to this extended, expanded version, that it is the most complete version in a lot of ways of what the Alice Cooper Band was. It is the most consistent version. It is the most comprehensive version, theatrically, thematically, musically. You guys were just better musicians, obviously, by 1973. Alice was a better singer by 1973. How did all of that impact the songwriting and the methods that you guys used to record it? Because it could not have been an easy process, right? 3 different places. And Alice always talked about the fact that there's a lot of guest stars on this record. He just doesn't remember when they recorded their parts.
Alice and I remember things pretty much identically. our early years. And then when Alice started drinking beer, then there's a little bit of variation in our memories. And then when he went to whiskey, you know, there's all of a sudden I feel like I remember things that he's kind of making up. But
All right, so what's the real story?
you know, everything was going so fast. We were touring at the same time we were recording the album. And one thing that had to do with the quality of this album over previous ones is that we recorded it in our own home. It was a mansion in Greenwich, Connecticut.
The Galicia estate?
That's right. And it had a gigantic ballroom. The ballroom was as big as this theater. And you could park a Volkswagen Beetle in the fireplace, you know, and Neil, the drums on Sick Things, the boom, boom. That's natural echo of that giant ballroom. We set up his drums in that room to record it. Then we had like a little wooden bathroom with old, wonderful carved paneling and stuff, but Alice could sing in there and it was be very muted and very clear for vocals. And then there was a solarium that had a checkered black and white marble floor and a big glass dome ceiling that was empty. So you went in there and you had this majestic echo. And so all of these different rooms added to the quality of the album, but not only that, but we're in our own home. You could do a couple of takes and then things might get a little tense and say, well, let's go in the kitchen and have a cup of tea and then come back and attack it again. The recording studio in New York City, you couldn't quite really do that. And so I think that had a lot to do with it. But then we had to go on the road. The album wasn't finished. In fact, we didn't even have enough songs, we didn't think. We were thinking in terms of a full show. So we had the rockers, but we wanted to come up with something different and something special as the opening song. And Bob Esrin brought in Hello Hooray, but what he brought in was the writer. Yes, thank you. Rolf. It was him playing, it was probably him, but it was somebody playing an acoustic guitar and singing. I didn't even know Judy Collins had recorded it until years later, but we thought, okay, the concept is exactly what we would like to open this album and therefore open the show, but we got to make it our own. We got to really turn this into this gigantic Alice Cooper production thing. And that's what we did. We worked it over, and within a couple of days we had the version that you hear on the album. But then we ended up in Morgan Studios outside of London, and we recorded Unfinished Suite, the one with the dancing tooth, and in the middle part is where I had a fuzz-toned wah-wah pedal for the bass, for that middle part that's wow, wow. And when we were recording that, I was very nervous. I remember I was like shaking. I was so nervous because I was worried about these two guys that kept busting into the studio and breaking up the session. It was a drunk Keith Moon and Harry Nilsson. And they kept coming in the studio every day, and one day Harry Nilsson even came in and walked in the studio and fell backwards onto the control panel and messed up all of the dials, and that was the end of the day. We had to start over on that song. So in the middle of this thing, I'm going, oh, please don't come in, you guys, please don't come in. Because I felt like I was on a roll, and I just wanted to get it done, and we did. And then I think we did Billion Dollar Babies there. Yes, we recorded Billion Dollar Babies there. And then we got this idea of having the two voices, the Alice is singing, and then the idea was it would be his counterpart singing along with him on one of the verses. And Donovan happened to be in the studio upstairs, so we went up and asked him, and that was pretty amazing because he came down, he brought this purple guitar with the moon on it that's on the cover of one of his albums. And I played it, it was great. And Glenn played that guitar while we discussed how we wanted these vocal parts between him and Alice to work. And so he was very attentive and very into it, and so they discussed all of that and wrote it all down, and then they were facing each other on the same mic. And I watched them as they started singing, and then all of a sudden Donovan went to these high notes that we have never heard him sing like that. You know, I don't think he ever did before that or after that, but that was pretty amazing. So there's so many moments to that album that add up to the whole thing. It's like, to remember all of them is a task, and even if you ask every band member what they remembered from that, at the end of that particular day, we'd all have a little bit different memory. And that's the other thing that's great in this album. Jan Uelski, the legendary Jan Uelski from Cream magazine, interviewed all of the original surviving members and Bob Ezrin, and in there is an 8-page book about our memories of every single song. Not only the ones that are on the Billion Dollar Babies remastered album, but the live album as well. It's really pretty cool.
You know, when I think about this album, when I think about, and I'm glad you talked about Hello Hooray. I'm fascinated by the fact that I do want to know, what did you think when you heard the Judy Collins version years later? Because it's very different.
Well, I was thinking, I'm not on that one.
To me, that was meant to serve as the curtain opener. It was meant to be sort of a cabaret record in a lot of ways. When you think about what the band meant on stage and off stage, this was the album that brought it all together. Is that how you thought of it?
Yeah, I love Judy Collins, by the way.
Sure.
Yes,
I believe
that's
you.
right. It was so, okay, we're the band that's doing theatrics when everybody's saying you can't do theatrics. You know, Bill Graham hated us. You know, and he used to be an actor before he became the promoter. You know, and he's like, I can't even tell you the quote that he said, but it was, they can do theatrics on my stage, or they can play music on my stage, but they're not doing both on my stage. And he swore that we would never headline at the Fillmore, and he lived up to that, because even when we got to the point where he had to hire us as headliners, he still always put our name at the bottom as special guest. We headlined the show, and Ike and Tina Turner opened for us, and It's a Wonderful Day opened, but their names are real big at the top of the poster, and then our name is smaller, because Bill Graham just couldn't let us headline. And we had to follow Ike and Tina Turner review. Oh my God, whose idea was that?
Were you aware of the fact when you guys finished it? Because I'm fascinated by, let me ask you this first. Bob Ezrin, what did he bring to it? Because I think you brought him back to do this record, correct? He had not done the previous one. He had worked with you guys before, but this is the one where he came back.
He had worked on Schools Out before this one. It was the next album, Muscle of Love,
right.
That was with Jack Richardson.
Right.
Yeah, so Jack Richardson was, the Guess Who. Jack Richardson was the first guy to get a Canadian rock band on American radio. And he was the guy that oversaw Love It to Death and Killer. Bob was the Prentice guy. And then Schools Out. Bob was the first album that Bob did by himself, even though he admits that he would get back to the hotel and call Jack and say, "Hey, Jack." and this album was, so that one, Bob was kind of not sure because Jack wasn't right there to ask questions and solve problems. But this one was where Killer was us walking in the studio feeling our oats. This was Bob Ezrin walking in feeling his oats. And it's also because he had that classical training, and we wanted to tap that, because all of these things of people talking about theatrics, this album with Hello Hooray and Mary Ann and even Sick Things had this stamp of these guys are theatrical. And Bob was instrumental in that because he had all the orchestration and everything that, you know, we were a rock band and all of a sudden here's these big sounding, you know, horns and stuff.
Did it surprise you and did it change you guys? Because as you're recording it at Galicia and then you go to London and there's also a third recording venue as well. So as you guys are recording and as Bob is helping you, I don't want to say refine, I don't want to say find the sound. You knew what you were. But a good producer hears you and helps you bring it out. And I'm curious what it was that he gave you that made this such a confident record. And I think at the end of the day, when I hear this, and I've listened to it quite a bit again in the last couple of weeks, it is the most confident record I think I've heard by a band during this period. I mean, there's something swaggery, there's something beautiful, there's something funny, there's something dark, there's something deep, there's something profound. You know, when I'm elected, at this very moment, I can think of no song that is more prescient in 2024 than Elected. Woo! I mean, it is timeless in every best sense of the word.
Well, thank you very much. Bob, you know, he was part of the band, so, but there was a bit of a teacher-student thing, because we could goof off and stuff, and from Jack Richardson's training, Bob knew, hey, we got to bring this in under budget, so you guys are wasting time over there, let's get down to business here, and let's get that bass drum and bass locked in. Take a break, everybody. Neil and Dennis, you guys play that song over a couple times and iron out whatever discrepancies you find, and then we'll come back in. So he kept the ball rolling in a professional way, where, you know, we might say, oh, well, I don't know, the bass and drums, let's go play pool for a while, you know, and whatever. It was different, you know. We were a rock band with a rock attitude, and Bob was more of a taught us professionalism. However, we were like sponges. Everything that happened in the studio, we were eager to learn fast. And by the time we got to here, everybody was on the same page. I knew what my job was, everybody knew what their job was, and we knew that we were going to barrel ahead and nail these songs, because we had always had a looming deadline. You know, you didn't have time to waste or goof around, because, hey, we've got to get these songs done, because we've got a tour, and when that tour's over, we've got to get this album out so we can do another tour. So it was always, at that point, it was always things were coming at you really fast. And Bob was kind of the ship's captain that kept everything on, you know, aimed on at the right place.
I mean, it's such a remarkable period for you guys. Alice was on the cover of Forbes, for God's sakes. I mean, that's an unexpected thing. Even today, when I go back and look at that cover, I'm like, that is the worst cover because the picture was terrible.
Michael's in that one too.
Right. It's a terrible picture. It's blurry. It looks like it was taken very quickly. They got one picture and said, all right, we're going to use it. But the pressure that must have been on you guys during that period must have been extraordinary.
There was a lot of pressure, but we were so rehearsed, and people would say, oh, do you ever get nervous on stage? The only thing that ever made me nervous is not being on time or something not working on stage. If an amplifier went out, and it happened, you know, all of a sudden the bass amp would go out one night. So now I've got another amp on the other side. Our roadies were great, but boom, 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 and now I'm playing bass, but I can't hear myself because it's coming out of the speaker way over there in the dark, you know. But still, we all knew exactly what to do, and by then we had pretty much had so many things go wrong in various shows that you just knew, you know, never let them see us sweat, you know, and half the time. The funny thing is, you would do a show and you would think, oh my God, that I just don't think we were that good tonight, you know. And then everybody's complimenting you, and you're like, what? Oh, okay. And then the next night you think, hey, that is pretty good, you know. And people are like, oh, what happened? You know. So, but then there's those nights where everybody knew it was good, and that's like in golf, you know, hole in one. That's what you keep coming back and striving for. So it's addicting, and the same with albums, you know. Writing a song is so satisfying because the artistic collaboration between all of the members of the group there were so many ideas flying around, and I was like the guy that always kept it stirred up, you know, because I would throw out any idea that popped into my head. I had no filter, and I had a lot of ideas that were pretty bad. But because I kept the volume of ideas, I would hit on good ones. And because of that, everybody always did that. And there was a lot of exchange. It was almost every single part of every song was discussed and voted on and tried different possibilities by the band. And that's also why it's good. We went the extra mile. We didn't just run over. That's the difference between bands that really become professional and write good music together, I believe, is that you're willing to work on every part of every song. You know, like we say, okay, we want, so School's Out did great for us because every time school is out or spring break, the royalties went up. So, hey, that's pretty good. How can we do that again? Well, there's an election every couple of years, you know, and then we dug up Reflected, you know, and we thought, okay, Reflected even says elected in it, and the melody's good, so Neil and I said, well, we gotta really put some fire into this, you know, and we decided to let The Who be our influence, and, you know, and so, but I remember that song in particular when we were recording it at the Gillespie estate. It was in the afternoon, and we had done a couple of run-throughs, and we were really close. So come on, guys, let's nail it this time. And we're playing through it, and then when we got to that outro where the bass is doo 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 doo, and I remember just having chills run up my spine because I said, "This is a take." And you know what? Other than School's Out, which was the only song I ever knew was a hit, or I felt was going to be a hit, I felt it on that one too. And I felt, oh my God, it's a wonderful feeling. It just rushes through you. And you have nothing. All you have is an idea, and then you've made it tangible. That's what's represented in all of those songs.
Where's Chris? Chris, how much time we got? I know we got to kind of wrap it up. We don't have all night.
You want to do like 5 audience questions and call?
No, not at all. I have
3?
one more questions. No, we'll take
No, you got 8 minutes.
All right, let me take one more question. Let me ask you 2 more questions. I'll take a couple from the audience because you did come out on a beautiful night. How did you feel when it went to #1? Tell me when you found out that it had hit #1 on the Billboard charts.
Oh man, I mean, you can't describe it. It's like, they love me.
Where were you when you found out?
People get it. You know, we were so used to people not getting it. And let's face it, even Rolling Stone panned that album.
Robert Christgau gave it a fantastic review, however.
Okay, well, we were nervous about good reviews at that point because we had made a career off of bad reviews, and now it's good, but we might not be doing something right. Yeah, it's wonderful. I mean, because all of a sudden now, instead of having, going from the early days when we come out to a room full of people, and as soon as we walk on stage before we even started playing, people would yell insults and line up at the exits. And now you've got Madison Square Garden, where as far as you can see, people are singing the lyrics. You know, it's that energy is, you know, it's not just coming off the stage. It's coming to the stage and going back off and it locks in this whole gigantic room, or even a small intimate room. It's that exchange of energy is what it's all about. I mean, you're really playing with the vibrations of air. You know, a bass makes certain wavelengths, and it disturbs the air in a certain way, you know, and then the guitar does it a little differently. You're really just playing with the vibrations of the air in a room. But the energy and those vibrations go together. And it's something that's can create lifetime memories. I mean, you hear certain songs. I know exactly where I was when I heard House of the Rising Sun by the Animals, for instance. I was in Oregon working on my grandpa's farm to get the money to be able to afford my first bass. And he had bought a bus to go around and pick up his pickers that would pick green beans on the farm. And I was painting, because I was the artist, I was painting his name on the bus, and I had a transistor radio, and there it was. So that's the power of music. Music, even, there's new breakthroughs in the benefit of music on people with Alzheimer's, the positive benefit of them helping their memory.
Do you remember where you were when you heard that it had gone number one?
I don't. Gee. You know, I might have been wishing it was not going to number one for, you know, I wish all of our albums had gone to number one. No, I don't remember exactly where I was at the time. I remember just being, you know, we were like king of the mountain, you know.
You were $1 billion babies.
I mean, Glenn Buxton was, you know, his whole thing about making it was that he could walk into a music store and say, "I'll take that." You know, and so I went with him and, you know, "I'll take that." Like, yeah, he'll take that, and I'll take that.
We got time for a couple of quick questions. Let's keep them short so we can get a few in. We'll start here.
So when you're on tour, on the days that you don't actually have shows, what's your daily schedule like?
On days on tour.
When they were on tour?
Yeah.
What were you guys doing when you were on tour but had days off? Or were they live?
Oh, well, you would try to go out and see the town, generally. Some towns were a lot more interesting than others, obviously, but, you know, but part of that is one of the things that is so valued and hard to come by when you're on tour is sleep. And a lot of times, any chance you could get to sleep. So on a day off, sleeping in was like, you know, wonderful, wonderful. But then you think, oh, okay, well, where are we? Let's see what's going on around here. And you try to get out and see the town a bit and maybe hang out with friends. Because touring, you meet a lot of friends in every town. And a lot of times you would come into town and you would have some friends that invite you over to dinner or whatever. So it was, for me, low key. For each guy, it was different. You know, there was the party guys. But one thing that it seemed to happen over and over to the point where it was almost like you wondered if there was something weird going on.